Hey there folks, how you doing today? Hope all is going well for you. Please bear with any background noise you may hear. Today we're going to be talking about the Alaskan rowboat rifle, the 243 Winchester that we rebuilt here on the channel. As I always like to show, this is a safe and empty weapon. There's no live ammunition out here with us today, and it's going to stay that way for the remainder of this production. As you may remember, I think this is part 5 for this rifle. We started out with pieces of a rifle that my dad gave me in a bag that he brought back from Kivalina, Alaska. He purchased it from a native up there, and they saw him coming. There was a lot wrong with it, and the amount of effort that we put into the rifle to make it functional was more than it was warranted, but it did make for an interesting build. In the last video, you saw me mount this Vortex Vanquish scope on the rifle. It's a 3x9x40, nothing spectacular. We're going to talk a little bit more about that here in just a minute. But up until now, we had not done any range work with this rifle. Well, that has changed. Took it out to the range, I think about 3 weeks ago with my buddy Jeff. Put a couple of boxes of 100 grain Hornady American Hunter ammunition through it, and the rifle functioned really well. There was one minor issue that was not really rifle related. So the crosshairs on this rifle are what Vortex calls a bullet drop compensating dead hold reticle. And I've got several scopes with the same setup. That's why I purchased this one, because it had the dead hold BDC reticle, which basically is a crosshair that's got a bunch of little lines on it. I'll try to find an image and put up here for you so you can see it. The issue that we ran into while we were out at the range is with this scope at 100 yards, the crosshairs are a little bit fuzzy. That's the best I can describe it as. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with the Vortex Vanquish scope, it's one of their lower end scopes. I think they have one other, I think it's called a Sonora, that might be a little bit lower. It's also a scope that's only available through certain retailers. Man, Normal is tearing stuff up over there. I apologize for that in the background. So I purchased this scope to be a budget option for a rifle that we had already spent too much money on. I think I paid $129 for it from Midway USA. And for $129, I really wasn't expecting great things. And it didn't disappoint. While we were out there at the range on the same day, we had 2 other rifles. One of the other rifles was my 308 Bear Creek Arsenal build, which has it's got a 4x16, I think it is. It might be it's either a 4x16 or a 6x20, I don't remember right off, but it's a Crossfire 2 scope that performed really well. And there was a night and day difference in the clarity of the crosshair at 100 yards. The Crossfire scope does have a parallax adjustment, which the Vanquish scope does not, and I don't know if that was the difference. There was definitely a noticeable difference in clarity between the Crossfire generation of scopes and the Vanquish. If I had it to do over again, I would have spent a few extra dollars and bought something other than this Vortex Vanquish scope. So having said all that about the quality of the scope, how did the rifle perform on the range? Well, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and here's what we managed to figure out. Alright, so range results from the Winchester 243 that we built in the barn. Let's see. First group, worst group, that was actually the last group. That would have been a pretty good group, except for that. That was me. I felt it the instant I pulled the trigger, so I put another one up there, and it actually wound up being, I forget if it was the upper one or the lower one, but it was one of those two. And that was Jeff. It wasn't me. And don't worry about that hole over on the other paper. That's for another video. So that's what we were able to do. Not great. I think it could have been better if the crosshairs of that scope would have been a little better. So you may notice there, those weren't great groups. Now, I'll point out, and I didn't mention it when I was showing the groups, but I had the rifle zeroed 2 inches high at 100 yards or with a 200-yard zero, whichever you want to call it. That is pretty realistic in terms of trajectory for a 243 100 grain bullet out of a 22-inch barrel. I'm sure there's somebody out there already banging away and saying, well, actually, it's only 1.9 inches. Yeah, I don't care. It's about 2 inches at 100 yards. And the group size wasn't terrible, but I really think that we were hampered by the scope that was on the rifle because, while I don't have a camera that's adequate for showing you what that crosshair looked like on a target 100 yards away, I can tell you that with all those little lines on that bullet drop compensating reticle, they just kind of vibrated around or wiggled in the scope at 100 yards in the heat. Perhaps it was mirage, I really don't know, but you can't expect ideal conditions when you're out deer hunting, so I wouldn't imagine opening day is going to be any better than it was the day that we were out there. That being said, I'm confident enough with this rifle to say that I could probably go deer hunting this year and harvest a deer with it. Unless, of course, that deer were wearing a Kevlar vest, in which case I would need an AR-15. So the best group that I shot with it was 1.9 MOA minus a flyer. And I can tell you for certain that flyer was my fault. So at present, I'm going to call it a 2 minute of angle gun with this scope, with the ammunition I was shooting. We're going to revisit this in the near future with some different ammunition and preferably a different piece of glass on the scope and see if we can't reduce those group sizes to about half of where they are right now. So there will be more to come on this rifle, but for now, I'll sign off. Take care. God bless. Feeding wrong?
Yeah, I short stroked it. Been accused of doing that before too.
Normal, settle down. Normal.
Stand by.